Hello, and welcome to Cobalt City. I will be your tour guide. Here's a brief section from the Mad World cycle, Warlock Rising, releasing March 12th, 2024. Cobalt City had seen a real rise in cycle gangs in the past 5 years. Motorcycles are fast. They can compensate for the absolute shitty New England highway traffic, the narrow streets of the Cannonade, the paved-over goat trails of Carlsberg. Any asshole with a bit of money or gumption could get a motorcycle. Motorcycle gangs are accessible. I'd been playing whack-a-mole with cycle gangs for years to try to keep them under control. I dealt with other crime as it came up, of course. Helped friends out with a contract killer a few years ago. Stopped my share of robberies. Ever since the incident in Arizona that sidelined Gato Loco, I'd been an on-call member of this international superhero team calling themselves the New Icons, though I hadn't been out on a ton of missions with them, and I wasn't afraid to go solo against a full-on villain like Ace of Spades, Pin, or the Pumpkin King. The Kevlar suit that Manny designed for me, coupled with the fold-out arm shield Snowflake engineered before he died, and my sonic scream helped to level the playing field quite a bit. And like I said, I'm brash. I'm scrappy. I got grit. I don't give up easily, even when I very likely should. Flash forward to this afternoon. There had been rumors of a recent gang calling themselves the Goblin Riders, staking out territory along both sides of the Pukwudgie River, mostly concentrated in Quayside's Industrial Row and across the river in downtown's Arena and North Docks area. They started out as a nuisance. Lots of sound and fury, street racing and intimidation, shaking down a few businesses. Small shit. Then they started dealing in drugs and moved up my list of priorities. The Goblin Riders were fond of blades, chains, iron pipes, gutter weapons mostly. Ordinarily, they weren't a real problem. They might have numbers, 30 or so members, maybe more, but I could pick them apart slowly over the course of a few weeks if that were the case. I was pretty confident they wouldn't be a problem. I mean, how many gangs had I broken up in the past few years? A dozen or more? How tough could they be? So when I caught sight of a 6-person squadron of Goblin Riders making a drop-off in the parking lot of a chop suey place near Bishop Arena, I saw my chance to make an example of them. I revved my cycle, caught up with them as they beelined for the Quincy Street Bridge. I pulled up alongside the rear guard and kicked him and his bike over at 30 miles an hour. That got their attention, and they stopped hard, going into a defensible position. There are few things I love better than seeing my foes turn their backs to the proverbial fire, attention turned outward to external threat. Brings something out in me to see adversaries take up defensive positions. It shows they're afraid, and I can work with that. Fear leads to mistakes. Fear leads to openings I can exploit. The Goblin Riders wore identical masks covering their lower face, black, composite materials of some kind, stylized like samurai masks with small tusks jutting up from their lower jaw. It would scare a normal citizen. I'd seen worse at Spirit Halloween. We dismounted and squared up, me against 5 punks with ridiculous masks and handheld weapons. Easy odds. I almost felt sorry for them. Then another rider turned the corner a block away and headed towards the pending melee. My first warning was the seismic rumble of their bike, which announced their arrival. I looked up from my assembled foes to see a massive brute of a rider on a huge street cruiser. The thing that caught my immediate attention was the rider's size. Even seated on the bike, I made them out to be over 7 feet in height, with powerful broad shoulders and bulging arms revealed by the sleeveless, studded leather vest. It took a second to realize the rider was a woman, a real muscle mama. I was so struck by the size and raw physicality of the new rider, I wasn't sure if she was with the Goblin Riders. But the mask removed any doubts. While the Goblin Riders had the black half masks, this person wore a full white face mask complete with bulging eyes and horns of a classic Japanese oni. This was not one of the street troops. This was not a scrub. This had to be a lieutenant, at the very least, if not the gang's leader. Judging by how the fear vanished in the eyes of the other gang members when they heard the bike approach, I figured I was right. The Oni masked rider coasted to a stop behind the others and unslung from her back a massive club that looked like a tree branch wrapped in iron bands and studded for an extra fuck you to anyone it came in contact with. Thing must have weighed 50 pounds. Easy. Using that club would be like wielding an uncooperative 8-year-old as a weapon. I wasn't too worried. The thing probably hit like a beast, but it wasn't fast, and using it was going to wear her out a lot faster than me dodging it. I was afraid you were going to have to make me work my way up the food chain to get someone important, I said, carefully gauging the distance between us. Even with the sudden burst of speed and the reach granted by the weapon in huge arms, the 15-foot gap would give me plenty of time to react if she tried something. It was a real good, the bad, and the ugly situation. The 6 of us, staring each other down, hands flexing, battle poses sharp. We stood there, waiting for someone to make the first move. Then I heard it. A quick pat, pat, pat of running feet, the jingle of chain behind me. The other rider, the one I'd engaged with first when I kicked over his bike, I'd counted him out since I'd topped him. I call it a rookie mistake if I hadn't been doing this shit for half a decade. Instead, it was just a dumb, overconfident screw-up, an unforced error, as my baseball-loving aunt would call it. I pivoted in time to see the chain coming and grabbed it with my left hand. A few quick twists wrapped it around my arm and rendered it useless while pulling the sucker into arm's reach. I clotheslined him with the other arm and he went down like a sack of potatoes. Awesome, except this was the opening the other gang members needed. When I turned, the other 5 scrubs had closed the distance and were already swinging. A quick mental inventory of what I'd seen them armed with previously included 1 impressive pig sticker, 2 cheap katana knockoffs, 1 crowbar, and 1 silly-ass weapon with a spiked ball attached to a handle by a short chain. With the scary masked woman content to stand back and watch, apparently, I settled in to knock these fuckers back to the Shire. I cranked open my mouth as wide as I could and cut loose with a sonic scream. It hurt, just like it always hurt, as it tore from my throat, but the furious roar of the sonic blast did its job and sent all 5 sprawling, buying me a little bit of time. It also gave me a little room to work. Shame I only had so many rounds in the chamber. At best, I could pull out 3 or 4 of those bad boys before I needed honey tea and a nap. I've pushed and done more in the past, but each time it felt like my throat shredded for days after, and the pain from the extra shouts meant the sonic wave wasn't nearly as effective the more I did it. I gave the fallen rider with the chain a swift kick to the head to encourage him to stay down. He did. With a click, I expanded the garbage lid-sized collapsible shield for my left arm guard. The chain that had been wrapped around my arm fell to the asphalt as I waded into the fray. My knee caught the one with the big knife in the jaw just as he was trying to stand up and sent him sprawling again. I kicked his knife under the chain-link fence around some industrial dumpsters. My Kevlar suit was great at absorbing bullets and other blunt attacks, but a really sharp poke could be a problem, so I was glad to have the blade out of the way. I had been right in assuming the katanas were knockoffs. While both of them hit, I barely felt the one that tagged me in the ribs, and the one that hit my shield snapped in half with the impact. I dropped the gang member who popped me in the ribs with a fist to the solar plexus, then a left cross with the shield arm. 3 of the 6 scrubs down, and I hadn't broken a sweat. If Gato Loco had been there, he might have warned me not to get cocky, but no. Manuel had a client meeting at his office, sandwiched between our living space/secret headquarters and the Kit Kat Club Gentlemen's Club on the ground floor. I guess, in a way, I was lucky that I turned just in time to see that sequoia of a club coming at me. Otherwise, I might have mistakenly thought I'd been hit by a truck. Also, it gave me the fraction of a second I needed to get my other arm guard up to deflect, somewhat. If not for the shield, the blow would have turned my forearm into a skin sack full of oatmeal. Even so, it smashed my arm painfully back into my torso and sent me flying over my parked cycle. Pretty sure I bounced twice when I hit, but I didn't really count. I was too stunned. I scrambled to my feet before the next scrub closed on me and managed to fight off a few of their attacks. But that stupid spiked ball weapon I discounted earlier pegged me hard to the head, cracked my visor, gouged a trough in my lip and chin with one of the spikes. Then the crowbar popped my knee from the side hard enough that it blazed like fire to stand on it, and I realized the tide had turned. I landed a few blows, but they lacked my earlier oomph, and my entire right side exploded with internal fireworks when I swung. The gang's apparent leader let her rats have me. She stepped up to my bike and looked it over, assessing it. Hell, maybe she was admiring it. I mean, it is a hella sweet ride. Me and Manuel had spent years fine-tuning it. I topped it out at 173 miles an hour on a straightaway once. It handled like a dream and never let me down, not once. Gato Loco had named his bike Shadow. I'd never anthropomorphized my bike enough to give it a name, but I loved it more than anything I'd ever owned in my life. I saw the club rise high in the air. I saw what was going to happen. I opened my mouth for another sonic scream just to have it catch in my throat, though, in all fairness, that might have been the crowbar slamming into my gut. Either way, there wasn't a damn thing I could do as the giant of a woman brought the club down in a devastating arc, smashing my bike's frame into a mangled mess. 3 powerful blows, and not a goddamn thing I could do but cry about it. Not my finest hour, if I'm being entirely honest. Bike destroyed, and me a limping, bleeding, crying wreck, the Goblin Riders collected their fallen, mounted up, and rode away. With my visor smashed, the suit's communication suite was effectively fucked, leaving me very few options to call for help. In one genuine miracle, my cell phone survived. Gotta love that Starcom mobile tech. No one makes a phone that takes a beating quite like a superhero known for taking a beating. I hadn't expected Manny to pick up when he was in a meeting. He rarely had the ringer turned on most of the time anyway. That suited me fine. I didn't want to answer his questions yet. Blotting my bleeding face with a handkerchief from my hip pocket, I waited and tried to get my breathing and voice to something of a baseline before the voicemail kicked in. You've reached the phone of Manuel de la Vega of De La Vega Investigations. I'm unable to take your call right now, but if you leave a message, either me or someone on my staff will get back to you as soon as possible. Listen for the beep. Beep! Hey Manny, it's Felix. I need a pickup. Bring the van. I'll text you the address. Short. Sweet. Simple. There was nothing left to do but get the ruins of my bike to the side of the road as best as possible with my battered body and wait for pickup. Mad World Cycle, Warlock Rising releases March 12th, 2024. It's available as an ebook. Get it where you can. Thank you.